joined in the studio now by Keith Merritt, the current A-State women's basketball play-by-play announcer. Keith, how are you doing this morning?
Doing well, thank you very much.
So I just wanted to get to know you a little bit more on a personal level first before we start doing everything. So what exactly made you want to go out there and do play-by-play?
Listening to St. Louis Cardinals baseball every day, every night. Because when I was a kid, the two Cardinals play-by-play announcers were Harry Carey and Jack Buck. And I thought, boy, that sounds like fun. It sounds like what they're doing is an awful lot of fun. I'd like to do that sometime. And of course, I'd originally intended to go to the University of Missouri, and I picked my school before I picked my major. I originally went there, I was going to be a sports writer, but there were two student-run newspapers. They merged, and I found myself as one of a 17-member sports staff, and I didn't much care for the assignments I was getting. So the news director for the student-run radio station lived down the hall from me in the dorm and said, I think you'd do good in broadcasting. So I went and auditioned on what was then KCCS, said, okay, you're on the air Tuesday. And that was it. I was pretty much been on the air ever since somewhere.
So you started play-by-play at Mizzou in 1973. What was that like? You were doing the baseball games.
I was doing baseball, and I was lucky. Usually, the student-run station did the baseball games at the time, and usually you got 1 year, because it would go to the senior who was most qualified. Well, I got lucky because the senior who was most qualified wound up getting a full-time job to be the sports director at KOMU Channel 8. Well, that left an opening. He didn't have time to do the baseball. And I was the next guy on the list, even though I was a junior. So I got to do Mizzou baseball for 2 years, which was pure luck. And I got to do play-by-play of Missouri baseball my junior year and my senior year. In between those two, I got to be an intern at KMOX in St. Louis, where they invented talk radio. And so that was like heaven. They didn't pay me. It didn't matter. I loved it. I loved working there.
So that had to be easy for you to get a job right after college then with the experience you had.
Well, it took a while. It took several months, and I was starting to look for non-journalism jobs. I got a call that a station in Blytheville, Arkansas needed a guy who could do news and sports. Harold Sudbury Jr. was the station owner. He'd been doing the play-by-play, but he just had his first child, and he wanted to spend more time at home. They needed a guy who could do sports play-by-play and also do news. They called to Mizzou's placement office, and they said, have we got a kid for you? So in the fall of 1975, I go from St. Louis to Blytheville, Arkansas, and start doing play-by-play of Blytheville High football, Blytheville High basketball. They had a brand new junior college, then called Mississippi County Community College. They decided to play basketball. We did some of their games, did American Legion baseball, and I wound up doing pregame shows for all the Arkansas Razorback games we carried, all the Arkansas State Indian games we carried, which was all of them, and all the St. Louis Cardinals baseball games we carried, in addition to the pregame shows for the local broadcasts as well. So I was a busy kid, 21 years old, just out of college. And so my transition from out-of-towner to good old boy happened at warp speed because I was bragging on people's kids. I didn't have anything bad to say about them. They were always winning.
So after Blytheville was over, is that when you made the transition to A-State?
No, I went to Streator, Illinois for a year and a half as the news director of a station up there. And the radio station was great. The town was less so. They call Arkansas the land of opportunity, and the first opportunity I got back. The Arkansas State job opened up just for basketball, and the late Greg Chance called me because he knew that my original goal coming out of college was to do college sports. And he said, hey, A-State's looking for a basketball announcer. So I applied, and the people who were in charge of it at the time were Charlie Raspberry and Rich Carville from the Department of Radio, TV, and the College of Communications. That's what it was called then. Again, right place, right time. They spent more time trying to sell me on Arkansas State than I had to spend trying to sell them on Keith Merritt. I took over that job, did basketball, did baseball, and then the football job came open. That had been done traditionally by some television guy in Little Rock, whoever had the coaches show. But this was absolutely wide open. And Bill Davidson told me, look, you go talk to Larry Lacewell. You're better than anybody we've had, but you got to ask Larry for the job. When Bill Davidson told you to do something, you said, yes, sir, and you went and you did it. And so I talked to Coach Lacewell, and he said, yeah. And so I wound up doing basketball that first year, and then the very next year became the voice of A-State football as well. And, during my tenure broadcasting Arkansas State sports, I wound up doing football, men's basketball. I was the first person to ever do a women's basketball game for Arkansas State. Did volleyball on the radio when the volleyball team made the NCAA tournament. Did a track meet when we had a conference track meet in Jonesboro one year. We did that. So I wound up doing just about every sport that Arkansas State had for KASU.
So what was it like doing all those games? That had to be such an amazing feeling to do that for well over a decade.
It was so much fun. Doing it now, this year I got back into it doing the women's games, and I realized now just how badly I missed it once I got back into the saddle and back on the road and back doing every game. Now, I've done Blytheville High School football for, better than the last 10 years. I've got a team, I've got a season, they don't have to lock me up in a rubber room. But I did some high school basketball, again, after I'd done Arkansas State. And that was a lot of fun. But being able to travel with Brian Boyer and this particular women's basketball team was just a blast. Absolute blast, because they're good people, they're fun people to be around, and they won a lot. And never discount that. Winning is much more fun than losing. I've had 10-0 seasons, I've had 0-10 seasons. The 10-0s are a lot more fun to do than the 0-10s.